thank you very much for both the introduction, for shortening it. It's always better in a short version. And just really appreciate everyone spending some time with us on a Friday afternoon. I was asked earlier, are questions okay? So the answer is feel free to interrupt me. I don't mind. I'll try to grab some time at the end with questions if you'd like, but seriously, don't feel bad interrupting me at all. I remember not long ago seeing the Green Bay Packers described as the most improbable team in sports. And I thought that was a really kind of an elegant way of putting it, because in many ways the Packers shouldn't exist. Founded in 1919, 2 years before the NFL became the NFL. They ran out of money at least 3 times. Every time the community got together and chipped in money and kept them afloat. They're the only community-owned team in the NFL. Actually the only community-owned team in professional sport in North America. And they're by far the smallest market of any professional team, again, in North America. It's improbable. Well, what we're going to talk today about a little bit is an improbable partnership. You might recognize the gentleman on the left, Mark Murphy, the president of the Packers. You may or may not recognize the gentleman on the right, Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft. But in this improbable partnership, the Green Bay Packers and Microsoft got together and founded TitletownTech. So as was mentioned, I'm the managing director of TitletownTech. And what we want to do today is talk a little bit about TitletownTech. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the changing face of technology, because we're in a really interesting time in the market. We're in a really interesting time for technology. And we've got some really kind of interesting opportunities that lie in front of us. And I want to see if Brad can make an introduction here.
Today I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin, in front of Lambeau Field, the storied home of the Green Bay Packers, just up the highway from Appleton, where I grew up. This region has an interesting history that really combines resilience and entrepreneurship and innovation. In some ways it started when the price of wheat fell and farmers had to find a new path to prosperity. One individual, Austin Coffrin, had a great idea. It was to turn the neighboring trees into paper and build the paper industry, which ultimately flourished here. He literally went door to door to door, selling shares in his company for $100 a piece. But he needed more than money. He needed a new idea. He turned not to new trees, but to recycled materials like newspapers and rags. He put money and that idea together, and his company, the Fort Howard Paper Company, became one of the pillars of the industry. Almost a century later, there is a new spirit of innovation right here across the street from Lambeau Field in the Titletown district, including TitletownTech. It was founded 5 years ago by the Packers and Microsoft as an incubation center, not only to fund, but to help and support the founders and entrepreneurs of our day. Like synthetic, Demiplane and Fork Farms, impacting everything from the way we grow and eat food, to play games, to use AI. We're celebrating the 5th anniversary by launching an even bigger venture capital fund that will fuel even more new companies. TitletownTech reflects another aspect of the Green Bay Packers, the only community-owned team in the National Football League. That same spirit of community is at the heart of TitletownTech. The story of innovation is always a story about people. People who have great ideas, who need the support of a community to turn their vision into a new reality. It's what is building the future, not just for northeastern Wisconsin, but for this entire state, the country, and the world.
There's something great about having Brad Smith be a spokesperson for you, so we were really delighted when he decided to put that video together. And a couple things that reflect from it. One, as he said, we're going to be celebrating our 5th year anniversary. Actually, on June 30th will be the completion of 5 years for us. And so it's been a very busy 5 years. And I think the thing that is probably my favorite in that video is when Brad talks about innovation always being about people. So we'll talk about technology and we'll talk about some of the things we're seeing in TitletownTech, but I think it's important to remember that underlying all of it is people who are trying to create something new of value, trying to bring an idea to life, and do so in a way that the market embraces. So we are very much an improbable partnership. We're very much an improbable entity, and we see our job working with entrepreneurs is finding a way for their improbable to become inevitable and really build and create something new and something special. Now, I thought I'd share a little bit about what we do. And so what we do really is do two things. We invest and we provide resources. So the origin story of TitletownTech in some ways goes back to the Packers Chief Operating Officer. Some of you may know Ed Policy, who's Chief Operating Officer of the Green Bay Packers. And Ed was really the catalyst behind what became TitletownTech, as he was asking some questions that went a little bit like this. He said, the Packers again have this great brand. We've got an active foundation giving money to virtually every one of the 72 counties in the state of Wisconsin. But then he asked, but what can we do to encourage business creation and entrepreneurship? Because more of our companies are being bought by organizations outside of the state than are being created here. We have to have more business creation. The second question he asked is, how are we helping create an environment where young talent and young families, especially technical talent, want to be here professionally and grow and create here? What are we doing to attract talent? And the third thing that he said, and what are we doing to help our industries make this transition from being involved in a very analog, in some ways we've been a really exceptional economic engine, but we've been a little slow on adopting technology. We were always very comfortable with being a follower, sometimes not fast, but sometimes a follower. And in fact, we used to brag that the coast would go up and down. We didn't have those kind of highs and lows that they had. In some ways, because our heritage had been seeing what worked and then applying it here. The challenge is in the digital world, the change that's taking place, we may no longer be able to afford to be a follower, even a fast follower. We're going to have to lead more than we ever have. And so the question that he asked was, how can we help really lead? And I was fortunate, as was mentioned, I'm on the Packer Board of Directors, just completed my 11th season. And on the Packer Board, I was somebody who had started their own business from scratch. I founded a company called Breakthrough Fuel. Was downtown Green Bay, now it's the Titletown district, but managed the energy that's used to move goods to market. We ended up scaling to be really a leader within the industry before I sold it to a company called US Venture that is making it even better while I've been able to run off and do TitletownTech. But they asked me as an entrepreneur, as a founder, what would you want if we're going to try to create something for entrepreneurs? And so for me, it really came down to two things. One, there has to be capital. One of the areas we struggle with sometimes is getting capital in the hands of entrepreneurs. Now, we as a state, in particular, are a very kind state. So if you want to start a business, you can probably find friends and family and angels who give you a little bit of money, and frankly, won't even care whether you succeed or not. They're doing it from a sense of community. But we had a problem that if you had a little success, you didn't know where to go, because we had this gap between Midwest kind, friends and family, and Midwest conservative banking and financial institutions who wanted to make sure you had 5 years of history and financial results and cash flow, and we had this gap. And we had to find ways to fill the gap, which is why capital is very important. So our first investments in the company will make anywhere between $200,000 and $2 million. So meaningful capital for somebody to stand up and build and grow a business. So capital had to be part of it. But frankly, capital was the easy part of it. What is really necessary is the connections into the marketplace and the network in order to help companies test their product, get real market feedback, have early pilots, get revenue. And so we really wanted to focus on how do we connect the resources in our community to help entrepreneurs build and grow. And so two things we do: invest and help resource. We do have some focus areas. And the reason these became focus areas is we asked ourselves at the beginning, what are the things that made the Wisconsin economy unique? What are our strengths? Because ultimately, out of our strengths will become the next generation of founders. They're subject matter experts, they know the industries, they also know the problems that exist. And so much of entrepreneurship is understanding what's a problem that needs to be fixed and thinking, I can be the one who fixes that. So the areas that we focus on are manufacturing and construction, technology really in those areas, manufacturing, construction, or the way I like to think of it is building things. We are very good in this market at building things. I also think venture capital historically undervalues building things, so it's really important to build things. So we want to build things. Second thing we want to do, supply chain and logistics, is move things. Because if we're going to build, we've got to move them to market. We've got to get raw materials in for our companies to manufacture. We also have a great, incredible heritage when it comes to supply chain and logistics in this area. Skipping around, I want to go to AWE next. We call it AWE, A-W-E, Agriculture, Water, and the Environment. We've got great history on food sustainability, agriculture, water, clean water, the Great Lakes and the resources we have, as well as natural resources in the environment. Again, we've got incredible talent in these areas. And then digital health, or ways to use technology and data to improve health and healthcare. Again, you think of not only Wisconsin, but the upper Midwest, and the incredible institutions and research that we have going on in digital health. And then the last two, cross-industry technologies, some technologies that just kind of work across industry, because we knew this was going to have a technology focus. And then of course, when your anchor partners at Green Bay Packers, you couldn't avoid sports if you wanted to, and so sports, media, and entertainment became another one of our areas of focus. And then I mentioned a little bit about Ed, but also mentioned the resources. And so we really took what we consider an ecosystem approach. And there's a quote in here that is worth pulling out, because the foundational paper that ultimately created TitletownTech was written in 2014. Very, very early in the process. And the thought we would really build around, so as Ed said at the time, we're in an era of colossal innovation and commercial creation, still true. More businesses are being created. Entrepreneurs are starting businesses at unprecedented rates, again, still true. The relatively few that succeed, and I think that's also relatively few of the companies that start actually succeed, but the relative few that do succeed, not only the strengths of the entrepreneur and the entrepreneur's ideas, but also on the quality of the ecosystem in which the idea of the entrepreneur built. And so we recognized that we probably weren't going to create entrepreneurs. We'd have to find them. We weren't going to identify all the problems and all the ideas. They would come from the market. But what we could do is create an exceptional ecosystem that an entrepreneur could plug into and use to help build and grow. And we really wanted to do things. One, increase the odds of success, and two, increase the speed to value. And we thought if we could do those things in the ecosystem, that we would be able to make a difference. And so we think about the entrepreneur and the portfolio company in the middle, and then us wrapping it with a series of resources. Our anchor partners, the Packers and Microsoft, our limited partners and investors, companies you'd all know, the Aarons and the Bolts and the US Ventures and the Schneiders, and companies that have been active in the environment. University partners, we work with the universities of Wisconsin who have 13 campuses. We plug into all 13 and make that connection between higher education and venture. Of course, community partners, our own team and advisors, and then, not surprisingly, founders who learn from each other. Because there's something magical when somebody who's trying to create is able to work with somebody else who's trying to create, because they're going through some of the same things. I've said one of the cool things about being an entrepreneur is literally there are days that you think, oh my God, I'm going to be a millionaire. And there are days that you think, oh my God, I'm going bankrupt and my family will never eat again. And those can happen in a 24-hour period. That's just the nature of being an entrepreneur. And I also share this story. I remember early in my days at Breakthrough, when I was working on it, and I had a bad day, because entrepreneurs have bad days. And I was walking with a colleague, actually in a Shopko parking lot, so that doesn't exist anymore, but a Shopko parking lot, and I made an offhanded comment and said, you know, I just don't know if this is worth it. And he literally grabbed me, squared me up and said, you have to do this, this is important. And I said, you're right, I have to do this, this is important. And so the thing that we always try to do also is make sure that the entrepreneur is surrounded by positive people, and it makes a real difference. And so they learn from each other. So we really took an ecosystem approach. And then because of one of Ed's points, we really wanted to make sure we created digital focus. Because we thought this was an area that was somewhat lagging in our area, and that if we could transform the way people think about technology, it would create an entirely different set of opportunities for our businesses. It's frankly one of the reasons why we're so excited about having Microsoft as a partner. And what's interesting is Microsoft provides a full-time technologist in residence. They actually moved someone from Redmond, their headquarters, to Green Bay. Best part is they pay for him, so we don't have to pay for him locally, they pay for him. And he helps our companies with tech strategy, with making connections in the technology marketplace, with finding resources for them, just an incredible resource. And then we've got a chief technology advisor from Microsoft. His name's Jason Zander. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Azure cloud, but it's the Microsoft public cloud. Well, he started with a 7-person team and built an $80 billion business. Remarkable. At the time he became our advisor, he had 28,000 engineers reporting to him. And he comes to Green Bay 1 day a quarter, every single quarter, gives us 9 to 5, and we can leverage him however we want. He's met with everyone of our portfolio companies. We've had him come in and conduct roundtables with our investors. We've had him conduct roundtables with CIOs in the area. And he also likes to bring friends often. So as an example, one of the last times, he brought someone, her name is Mitra Azizarad, and Mitra is the person who created the ethical use of AI standards for Microsoft. So we're able to have conversations not only about artificial intelligence, but about the appropriate use of it and the inappropriate use of it. And so really bring thought leadership into the area. So the technologies that we're looking at, thinking about seeing incorporated not only into businesses, but also tools for founders and entrepreneurs to use to solve problems are artificial intelligence, and I'm really going to focus a couple things on AI today. But artificial intelligence, we're seeing a lot in the Internet of Things, 5G, connected devices. Frankly, we are fortunate because not only is Microsoft a partner, but AT&T is as well. And so AT&T provides a resource who's the director of emerging technologies and innovation that comes up about every other week to work with our companies. We see a lot in autonomous systems, and also there's some incredible things happening on the quantum front right now. And so things that we really need to think about. But I want to take a moment and just take a dive into technology for a second, because this 5 years has been fascinating for us. And I think something happened in the last 5 years that I'm not sure that I expected. But I think we moved from the first half of the chessboard to the second half of the chessboard in these 5 years. Now, I don't know if you know the story of the invention and the creation of chess. Indian mathematician, as the story goes, created this elegant game and took it to the ruler of India and said, hey, I want to show you this game that I've created. And of course, the ruler of India was absolutely blown away by the beauty and the elegance and the competitiveness of this game, and so decided, I want to reward the inventor with something. What would you like? And he was thinking that the inventor may want money and riches or land or something. And he said, well, what I really want is for, on the first day, I want 1 grain of rice on the first square. Second day, double it, put 2. Third day, double it, put 4. And they thought, well, this is incredible. This is so easy that, of course, we'll give you this grain of rice for your invention. Without realizing that by the time you hit the second half of the chessboard, the square was going to be more than all the rice that was grown in the world at the time. Because there wasn't the thought of what does this exponential doubling look like? And so I think, again, as the parable goes, the mathematician probably was executed for pulling a trick on the ruler, who knows? But what's been interesting is somewhere along in this 5 years, we appear to have moved from the second half of the chessboard, and I just want to talk about that. Many of you might be familiar with Moore's Law, this concept that over the last number of decades, that the compute power has doubled every 18 months or so. And I think when this was first mentioned way back, there was a thought that this would run out at some point. What's really strange is it still hasn't run out. We're still seeing this double of compute happen in every 18 months. But even that's different now. Because with AI, we're actually seeing AI compute 10x every 18 months. The change that's taken place in AI, even over the last year, has been absolutely fascinating to watch. It is frankly changing everything. So technology is absolutely accelerating exponentially. We're advancing exponentially, and what's been interesting is seeing this acceleration, this shifting of time in some ways. So I was thinking back on my business career, and some of you will remember some of these, but if we look back to the personal computer, this was actually the first personal computer I had. This is called a Radio Shack or Tandy TRS-80. We called it the Trash 80. I don't know if anyone would remember this, but this was the Trash 80. When I bought it, it had 4K of memory. I spent $499 and bought the upgraded memory pack to make it 16K, and I thought it could do anything. This is what I learned to program on. It took 18 years to go from the first PC to 100 million users. And then I had a bag phone. I don't know how many of you remember the old bag phone days. I had a bag phone, and I thought this was the coolest thing in the world, plugging this into your vehicle and actually being able to talk. It was like wild, funny to think about now. It took 15 years from that first until 100 million users used it. And then we think about the internet. I started working with the internet, dial-up on AOL. Some of you will remember getting compact discs in the mail and having to plug your telephone line in so you couldn't make phone calls when you were on the internet. And remarkably, it took 7 years to go from launching the internet to 100 million users using it. Now, I will tell you, I've never had a Facebook page in my life. I intend to keep it that way. But Facebook then, again, accelerating even a little more, took 4 years to get from start to 100 million users. How many of you use ChatGPT or any AI? So I'll call it a third of the room. We'll count you as a third plus one.
I'm sorry.
So, no, I said we're making a third of the room plus you, so plus one. 2 months to go from introduction to 100 million users. 2 months. This isn't an exponential line anymore, this is a straight line. It's incredible to think about. Now, what is one of the struggles we have is this technology is advancing exponentially, but most of us are still learning and our organizations are learning pretty linearly. And so we need to adopt entirely different kinds of strategies if we're going to be successful, whether you're an organization or an entrepreneur or founder, to compete in this time when technology is advancing so almost disorienting fast, to keep up with it and figure out how to apply it in appropriate ways. That's what we think about operating on the second half of the chessboard. So I want to talk about 2 things. I want to touch a little bit on AI, and a little bit about what we're seeing at TitletownTech. But there were a couple of things that I saw here recently. So first off, I don't know how many are you familiar with the Boston Consulting Group. Consultants in the Boston Consulting Group, after AI and ChatGPT was introduced, took 2 groups within their organization. One that they had worked the traditional way they were. The other ones they taught and asked to employ AI in the work that they were doing. This came out about November, December of last year. Literally within 6 months, the group that was using AI had increased their speed by 25% and had increased the quality of their work by 40%. But you just stop and think of, in the consulting world, to all of a sudden as an organization have 25% more means of productivity is remarkable. And to know that at the same time, quality was better. So if you're gonna compete in that industry and you're not deploying these tools, you risk falling incredibly behind. But another one that I thought was even more remarkable in some ways is technology and code. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with GitHub. It's a code repository that as organizations complete computer code, they use that to keep track of their source code, manage versions and things. As of last month, 64% of all the code that was logged in GitHub was generated by artificial intelligence, not by humans. I mean, stop and think about that for a moment. The whole development industry increased their productivity 64%. Now, I gave a presentation similar to this in November. November was 30%. So just from November to March, it's doubled in terms of the amount of code. Absolutely incredible how it's changing. So you start thinking about how people and organizations can dramatically increase their productivity. But it is also worth recalling that every upside has a downside, because speed is remarkable. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Worm GPT. So 8 weeks after the launch of ChatGPT, the dark web launched Worm GPT. It is AI without any of the safety rails, any of the things that the legitimate developers of AI have used to make sure it's not used for nefarious purposes, was engineered and launched to the marketplace with no safety guardrails in it. This is dangerous. 8 weeks from good to bad being launched is remarkable. Just speaks to the speed that we're operating in the second half of the chessboard. So what I want to do is just share a little bit about what this looks like at TitletownTech, and I'm going to do it through the eyes of 3 founders. I'll share a little bit more about how many companies we've got, but I want to do it through the eyes of 3 founders. I'm going to talk a little bit about a company that's involved in mental health, a little bit about a company involved in food safety and health, and a little bit about an AI company that's here in the state of Wisconsin. So I want to start with a company called Feeling Great. It's a company focused on mental health. Now here's an example of, inside TitletownTech, it was probably 2.5 years ago that we recognized that we wanted to move our health vertical from being focused on human health to also be focused on human wellness. The challenges we've seen with mental health issues, across our community and across, our campuses has been just absolutely stunning. I remember I was chairman of the GB Council of Trustees at a time when almost 40% of students were identifying as having mental health concerns. It's incredible to see some of the challenges that people are facing right now. And we've probably looked at 150, maybe more, startups in the mental health space. And most of them were garbage. They weren't very good. They were kind of exploiting the problems. And it went from some who weren't really moving the needle to some who were looking at just having AI become therapists and having you talk with AI bots, which we consider to be really dangerous because AI can hallucinate and it can take you into some dark spaces as well as some good spaces. So we looked at all kinds of mental health applications and found this one. Their mission is really simple: help the world feel great. The gentleman who's kind of phased out here, who's got the same color hair that I do, although he has more of it, Dr. David Burns is one of the leading professors and instructors of behavioral therapy out of Stanford, has an incredible amount of resources, trained tens of thousands of therapists around the country. And the idea was, how can you take something that's been scientifically proven in terms of mental health therapies and techniques and make them available for the masses at very low cost? So the idea that they had was they wanted to make sure somebody could work with this technology over the course of a year for less cost than one visit to a therapist would be, and then find a way to make it engaging. And so what they're doing is they're using AI not to interact with the patient in terms of trying to help them work through their problems from a therapeutic standpoint, but it's using AI for really a couple of things. One is to provide memory. Because one of the struggles when you're using an app or technology is if you use it one day and you don't feel the need to use it for the next 45 days and you pick it up again, you want it to remember what you talked about last time. You don't want to feel like every time you interact, you're interacting for the very first time. And what this is doing is AI is creating memory. So if I was on there one day and again, 45 days later I went back, that I would be able to say, hey Craig, do you remember talking about this, why you were feeling a little bad because one of your companies just did something stupid or whatever it would be? And I would say, yes, I do remember that, and I still feel bad. And it would pick up a conversation where it is, which I think is a remarkable positive use of AI. And the second thing that it does is help navigate from what I'm talking about in terms of what I'm uncomfortable with into the technique that's been proven scientifically from research to say, here is something to try, and to walk you through that path to, as it says here, crush negative feelings. And so we think this is an important area. We're really excited about this company. It's using AI in a really specific and novel way that I think has a potential to impact the mental health of just a number of people. A second one, this is Abby. Abby is a founder here in Wisconsin who's an attorney, but we didn't hold that against her. Well, we kind of did. But she's got bad food allergies. In fact, I remember when I met Abby, she told me, the scariest place in the world for her is a vegan restaurant. And I thought, boy, I never would have guessed that. And I remember asking, so why is the scariest place in the world a vegan restaurant? And she said, I don't have dairy allergies, but I've got tree nut allergies. And so I went into a restaurant, ordered what I normally would order, that I've eaten for my whole life, without thinking that they would substitute almond milk for milk. And all of a sudden it became a night out to a life-threatening event. And she went into anaphylactic shock multiple times, almost died from eating food away from home. So when I met her, she was literally afraid to eat food away from home. But she's an entrepreneur, she's a problem solver. So what she did is try to figure out a way to make it safe. So she's created a little device that when you go out to eat food away from home, you take a little tube, you put food in, twist it up, it's got a solution, and you plug an amulet, it looks like a little USB stick, you plug an amulet in, pop up your phone, and it will tell you no peanut molecules present, it's checking for peanut, or it'll say there's 300 parts per million, and so you can decide whether the food in front of you is safe to eat. It's really a fascinating new venture and a new way of utilizing technology and a new way of creating algorithms that can identify at the molecular level whether or not there's something that's harmful to one individual within the food they're eating. Another example of the type of founder that we're supporting at TitletownTech and investing in. Because one of the things we think is really important is we want people who are solving meaningful problems. I always think about with the Packers and Microsoft putting a brand next to something, and are we going to feel good about it or are we going to feel bad about it? If this works, we're going to feel good about it. And then again, because innovation is always about people, this is Corey Jaslowski. Corey is a fascinating individual on his own right. He was a National Explorer Founder of the Year. He was down on the Titanic. In fact, he took James Cameron down on the Titanic. So he's imaged the Titanic from submarine underwater. He has imaged Everest from above Everest. He's been on every continent. And he is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, who then went on to MIT and got his master's in artificial intelligence. But I think the Stevens Point part is the more interesting part of that story for me. So he's a Wisconsin person who went on, traveled the world, did some amazing things, but always struggled with the concept of AI not reaching its true value and purpose. And so he decided to launch a company. It's called Synthetic. The part that we love is when he decided to launch the company, he decided to move back to Wisconsin because he wanted to live here. And we were the first people investing in at the time. He was like, well, I didn't know that I could come to Wisconsin and get investment here. But he's created a technology that allows you an image or video or geospatial data to find anything in real time without any label data, without pre-training models, without pre-training algorithms, literally instantaneously. And I won't go through this, but he's got a pipeline of the way he processes it, and the biggest thing is he can take a single image and then use that image to find something, again, in any image and video. The favorite example, the one he became best known for, is when they found the Chinese spy balloon a little over a year ago in geospatial space, tracked it back to its launch point off Henan Island, China, and showed that very quickly, I mean literally in a matter of minutes, could find things that had never been found before in geospatial imaging. The thing that's cool is he's doing here in Wisconsin. He also has been working as an example with CNN as they've identified all the damage that's happening in Gaza and has been their engine to understand what's going on. And one of my favorite stories about it happened with a project they were doing in Mozambique with the United Nations, when the United Nations was looking to make this transformation from using humans and helicopters to drones and technology to find people after a significant event. And so they contracted with a traditional AI company who built models pre-trained. Unfortunately, they trained them in California and Texas. Fortunately, they trained them with hikers who were wearing bright colored clothes and things like that. And when a natural disaster hit Mozambique and the technology was deployed, it didn't find anything because the model didn't have the context of the environment. And they trained it in a way that wasn't applicable. So they asked Corey to do a test to see if his would work. And again, being a practical guy from Wisconsin, we're good problem solvers. He's like, okay, put the drone up. I know where one human is in Mozambique, and that's the drone operator. So just turn the drone around, take a picture of the drone operator. That's the only image I need. Now I've got context of a human in that environment. And then use that in a matter of less than 10 minutes, deploy an AI algorithm that could find, I think they found 87 people or something relatively quickly. Problem solving using technologies in new and novel ways. So bless you. So we're so excited about the potential of technology, but it is all about people. And we're seeing incredible people solving really meaningful problems here in Wisconsin. So for us, we've been able to raise $95 million so far to invest in early stage companies. We're really proud that we've had as many companies that have come in. We've had 31 investors to date. We've invested in 36 companies. Our hope is over the course of the next 3 years to find 35 more or more than that to invest in. So we're actively looking for companies and founders that we can get behind and invest in and try to help bring their improbable idea to an inevitable one. We also allow companies to be in residence. So if you ever go around Lambeau Field, you see this glass building that's got a 96-foot-long sign on top that says Titletown. That's us. We've got 5 companies in residence so far, and one of the things that we think is really cool is, I remember when we started, we thought, wouldn't it be nice if a company decided to move to Wisconsin because of what we're building here? And June 1st, we'll have our 6th company move to Wisconsin. We've had 2 from Los Angeles, 1 from Denver, 1 from Birmingham, Alabama, 1 from New York City, and on June 1st, the company is moving from Phoenix, Arizona to Green Bay. And we've never made a conditional investment. We would never say we'll invest in you if. We say we'll invest in you, and then we'll help you become part of an ecosystem. And if it's working, we find that they want to be deeper and deeper into the ecosystem that we're building. So that's our story, a little bit about TitletownTech. Thanks for letting me share a little bit on both what we're doing on technology. And I know we've got a little bit of time, so I said I'd save some time at the end for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I would love to take them. Yes?
Two quick ones. One, do they have to be Packer fans? And two, who decides how they get in? Do you have a board that reviews applications, or just employees of the Titletown that review, like I said, the long process that they have to show, like Shark Tank, where they bring the numbers and profit and all that jazz, or just?
Yeah, great question. So first, do they have to be Packer fans? Well, obviously.
Okay.
I mean, who do you think we are?
Yeah.
No. We have a strong bias toward Packer fans, but we also believe that if we get them in our environment, we can convert them. They just can't be Viking fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to draw a line. And then the process. So we've got a team. We've got a team of 8, and so the process is normally, connecting with us some way, and we will almost always have you come in and do a pitch. It is not Shark Tanky. Our job is not to play gotcha. But we do try to find a few things out. So this is just, if you ever decide to come, I'll share your kind of inside story. One, we'll almost always ask you what problem you're trying to solve. You'd be surprised how few people can answer that question. Now, part of it is because sometimes people will come in with an idea. We'd rather invest in somebody trying to solve a problem, because if they're trying to solve a problem, and they get feedback from the marketplace, they will work with the market to try to find a more effective way to solve the problem. We've seen sometimes, if they come in with an idea and they get negative feedback, instead of saying, maybe I should listen, they'll say, well, they're dumb, they don't understand yet. And so much higher success of companies if they can identify the problem they're solving. Second thing is, a question we ask ourselves always is, are they trying to do something or be something? We want to work with people who want to do something. Now, you would be surprised, I took a pitch not that long ago, and I asked the person, why are you doing this? This is an honest answer I got. You got, well, there's this company who's doing this, and they're worth $1 billion, and I am smarter than that CEO is, so I should be worth more than $1 billion. That's why I'm doing it. Thank you. And so, so you're gonna come in, we're gonna be fairly Midwest kind, but we wanna really know that you're thinking through the problem and trying to do something meaningful. Now, how long does it take? The fastest one we've ever gone from introduction to investing was under 24 hours. That doesn't happen often. But somebody walked in and we were like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I will fight and claw to get in this deal. The longest has probably taken 9 months, because sometimes it's like, okay, we want to see market feedback, or how you're thinking about pricing. And sometimes it's a long dating process, and sometimes it happens really quickly. It's all so unique. It really is a one size fits one. I don't think there's any way to do what we're doing other than one size fits one. You got a question?
When we were talking about attracting business to Wisconsin, is a lack of skilled labor a deterrent?
I don't think so, for 2 reasons. And I take the synthetic as an example. I think we often say that, hey, we've got a problem, we don't have, especially technically, we can't get talent here. I don't think that's true. Synthetic's a good example. When we met them, it was 2 or 3 folks. They're now in they're now in Wisconsin with more than 60 people, almost all in Wisconsin, deep technical people, PhDs. I believe if you're working on something that's interesting and meaningful, smart people want to work on interesting things. So, second is, smart people want to work with other smart people, because it will make them better. So if you're working on something that's meaningful, and you have the opportunity to work with smart people, you can find talent. Where you can't find talent is when there's no connection between the purpose of what you're doing and somebody who's working there, and you just have to buy talent. But I'm convinced there's more than enough talent available in our region if you're doing something meaningful and if you can have them work with really great colleagues. Yes, sir.
So you started the fund with the Packers and Microsoft. You've got 31 investors now. What kind of makeup of those other people that are in?
Great question. So when we look at our investors, we made a really conscious decision that we didn't want to take the traditional way of going after high worth individuals, institutional money, family offices. We wanted organizations who could actively engage with our startups. So you'd find almost all our corporates. So again, Schneider, Green Bay Packaging, Aaron's, US Venture, Bolt, Kohler, Aaron's. So companies like that. And I think all but 3 are Wisconsin-based companies. So we wanted to create this really strong Wisconsin ecosystem. But one of the things that I was concerned about, because I'd seen it happen before, is regions who create a little bubble, and they just stay within a little bubble. And we knew that even though we wanted Green Bay and Wisconsin to thrive, that as we were launching, 75% of all private equity and venture money was Boston, New York, and Silicon Valley. So we felt we have to be connected to the major capital markets. So we've got an investor in New York City who runs they used to own the New York Mets, so now they've got less baseball but more money, which is okay. But deeply connected in the New York ecosystem. We've got an investor from Boston, deeply connected in the Boston ecosystem. Now with AT&T, they're in Dallas, so we've got some good connections to Dallas, and of course Microsoft gives us the West Coast and Silicon Valley connections. So think of it as Wisconsin-centric organizations who want to engage, but deeply connected into the national economic markets. Because it's ultimately important for us to draw money into this area, not just trade money locally. Yes?
I'm just curious, like, what is TitletownTech doing with kind of that younger, like, I'm in high school and maybe even younger to kind of grow and engage the next generation of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Frankly, it's a question we struggle with. So Maddie, here's a wave. Maddie is our community manager. So part of Maddie's role is how to engage a broader community and kind of create those experience and opportunities that you had. How many you had?
We had 60 members from state FBLA come through earlier this month.
Wow, yep.
We've got a school district coming in with their tech advisors, just to get out of their normal box, and they get to use our facilities to open up their mind a little bit and maybe stretch it in a different way than they're used to. So really working from that top-down approach. And then several of our team members do a lot of great work individually outside of TitletownTech. You're always still representing the brand, but speaking at like Seymour's High School, teaching classes, things along those lines. So.
And I really think it's trying to create opportunities for exposure so that people believe, so that young folks can believe that, hey, there's something here that, you know, becomes a bit inspirational for them. But, you know, you always feel like you can be doing so much more, and it's our constant struggle because it's like we've got 8 people, we've got 36 companies, we're busy, we're trying to create that, but we always want to do more. But it's also my way of saying, if you have any ideas, we're really open to finding new ways to do that and explore it. I think I'm about to get the hook. So with that, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the time with you.